Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm Liz Bridgewater, the Director of Outreach at Climate Action Now, and one of many people who work to bring this action party to you tonight. It'll be just a few moments while people continue to gather. While we're waiting for more folks to join, I invite you to answer the icebreaker trivia questions that you'll see pop up on your screen in just a moment. Alrighty, you should be seeing that quiz now. We've got 3 questions for you this evening. The first question is, in which year and country were the first solar cells created? Secondly, getting us to the topic of tonight's conversation, what percentage of global greenhouse gas emissions come from residential buildings in 2021? And finally, how much do you think the average American household could save a year with an electric car and an electric home? While you're trying your hand at this trivia quiz, if you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so we can all see each other. We will be recording this action party, and it will be available publicly online. If you do not wish to appear in any shared content, please keep your camera off. We'll send out the recording tomorrow. If this is your first ever action party, let me give you a quick overview. An action party like this is an opportunity to learn about important environmental issues from people who are experts in their fields. In the course of the same hour, we're going to use the Climate Action Now app to take action together. The Climate Action Now app makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to political decision makers and to business leaders. To show you why it's so easy to take action with the Climate Action Now app, I'm going to share my screen for just a moment. Alrighty, so this is an example of an action like the one that you'll see tonight. It only takes 3 touches to take an action. First, you're just going to touch Do It Now. Then you can choose how you want to contact the decision maker that you're reaching out to. Because the app has your address, it's automatically going to know who your federal, state, and sometimes even local officials are. Then you just have to hit send and you've taken an action. You'll notice that as you take actions, you're going to also earn points. When you earn enough points, Climate Action Now will plant a real tree on your behalf. So far, the Climate Action Now community has planted over 268,000 trees together. All right, let's share the results of our icebreaker poll now. Kaylee, would you share those results?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Happy Earth Day and happy 4th birthday to Climate Action Now. I'm Kaylee Beam, Climate Action Now's Director of Content, and I am going to go ahead and share those poll results. So they should be appearing on your screen shortly. All right, our first question. What year and country were the first solar cells created? The answer, as you can see, is 1883 in America, nearly 150 years ago. So in 1883, American inventor Charles Fritz made the first solar cells by coating selenium with a thin layer of gold. Fritz had hoped his solar cells might compete with Edison's coal-fired power plants, but they were less than 1% efficient at converting sunlight to electricity. Not yet very practical, especially when you consider that most modern solar cells work at an efficiency of 15 to 20%. But hey, all great innovation has to start somewhere, and look how far solar has come. Now it's the cheapest source of electricity in many countries around the world. On to our second question. The correct answer is 12.5%. So residential buildings account for 12.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and commercial buildings for another 6.4%. That means that residential buildings alone contribute more to global greenhouse gas emissions than global agriculture, which accounts for 11.7%. On to our final question. The answer is, as most of you guessed, oh, I see a question in the chat. The answer for the first question was 1883 in America. All right, our third question, the correct answer is over $2,500 a year. According to a study by Rewiring America, the average American family can save $1,050 to $2,585 a year by switching to an electric car, heater, and stove, as well as by replacing other home equipment powered by fossil fuels. The average American household currently spends more on electricity costs than on education, and spends more on natural gas costs than on dental services, which is shocking but helps put things in perspective. In order to unlock these climate-friendly cost savings, America needs to prioritize lowering the cost to decarbonize homes through regulatory reform, industrial scaling, and financing. So thank you all for participating in our little trivia quiz to kick off tonight's event. And it wouldn't be me if I didn't throw up a little celebratory effect for all of you. So great work. And now, before we get to the main part of our event, I'm going to get us all ready to take some action tonight. So let me share my screen. You should be seeing it shortly. All right. So if you're an Action Party regular, you already know what to do. So go forth, be free. You don't need me to tell you what to do. If this is your first time attending, let me introduce you to our goal tracker. So on the left side, we have this lovely little globe, which is going to fill in and iterate as we take action here tonight. On the right side is this QR code, which is what you're going to scan to get into the app. So go ahead and take out your phones or tablets, or go wherever you open up your camera app or wherever you usually take photos, and point it right at the QR code box on the right side of the screen, under where it says current action. And as you're pointing your camera at the QR code, a little yellow bubble that says Climate Action Now should appear. So just tap on that once it does. Now, if you don't have the app already, tapping that bubble will take you to the App Store where you can download it for free. And once you have the app, all you need to do is follow the prompts to sign up, and it'll take you right to the Decarbonize Our Homes campaign, which is where you want to be for tonight. So I'll give everyone a moment to get in there. And if it's not working for you, don't worry. You can also go to your phone browser and type in the link that's directly under the QR code right here where it says CanApp link/building decarb. And once I'm done with this tutorial, I'll make sure to put that in the chat as well. Just like the QR code, it will take you to the campaign if you have the app, or to the App Store to download if you don't. And if you're still having trouble, that's all right. The campaign will be open long after today, and we'll share detailed instructions in our event follow-up email along with the recording, so you can access it even after this event. So yeah, once you're in, feel free to take action all event long. Our current goal is 500 actions by the end of the hour, and I think we can get there. So thanks everyone. That's all from me. Back to you, Liz.
Thanks so much, Kaylee. Next, I want to share a special thanks for our moderator tonight, Jessica Craven, who's author of the hugely popular Chop Wood, Carry Water newsletter on Substack. Jessica is an ardent champion for democracy and other progressive causes. We will be putting a link to Jessica's Substack in the chat. Before we hear from Jessica and our panelists tonight, we're going to start with a brief presentation by Brian Stewart, who is founder and CEO of Electrify Now. Electrify Now is a volunteer organization devoted to educating energy consumers about the economic and environmental benefits of electrifying our homes and our transportation. Brian has over 30 years of experience in product design, engineering, manufacturing, and sustainability, including serving as Vice President of Sustainable Innovation at Nike. He has presented about the benefits of electrification to leadership and employee groups at Adidas, Google, Bank of America, and many other organizations around the United States. Super excited to hear from you tonight, Brian, and over to you.
Thanks very much, and welcome everybody. Let me get my presentation set up here. Yeah, so we started Electrify Now about 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago now, because we were frustrated that there just wasn't good information for people like you and I about all the really important things we can do in our own homes, not only to cut our carbon emissions, but to help transition the world to a sustainable future. And so there's lots of things to be excited about when we talk about going electric, which is how we phrase it. All these actions that we're going to talk about today lead to healthier and safer homes, which makes your homes more comfortable. It lowers your energy bills, like we've already had some discussion on. It dramatically reduces air pollution in our communities. And of course, for carbon emissions, there are very few things you can do. I don't think there's anything you can do more than electrify your home, particularly if you're a homeowner. So it helps to start out by just understanding where carbon emissions come from. Even as a sustainability professional, this was a little opaque to me until I dove into the numbers and refigured some of the statistics you get from people like the US EPA. But when you dive into this, what you find is that about 80% of the carbon emissions in the United States come from burning fossil fuels for energy. And around the globe, it can be a little less than that in less industrialized countries. It's maybe more like 75% globally, but most industrial countries, it's at least 80%. Of course, there's carbon emissions that are related to agriculture and from wastewater and waste treatment plants and the waste that we we put the landfills and industrial processes, but it's really burning fossil fuels for energy, which is the reason why we're probably even here tonight, because of this climate change problem. And when you unpack that a little bit more, what you see here in the United States, about 25% of our our carbon emissions come from burning coal and natural gas to create electricity. A large and rising part of our carbon emissions comes from transportation. And it's, for the most part, it's our cars and it's the trucks that you see, everything that's on the highways. That's really the major source of carbon emissions from transportation. Boats, trains, even airplanes, much, much, much smaller portion. Of course, we have to transition those modes of transportation as well, but cars and trucks are the main culprit. And then heat. This is the one that's most invisible to us. And particularly if we have natural gas in our homes, you don't see the air pollution that comes from the smokestack, but it's definitely there. It's a major source of air pollution in our cities. And the more we find out about natural gas and methane, we learn from all the methane that escapes during extraction and distribution of this gas to our homes. It's similar or even worse in some cases than coal in terms of its climate effects. And you hear the gas industry talking about renewable natural gas, but there's no way that that solution is going to save our bacon, so to speak. And there's not near enough of it. And it's still burning a fuel, which is kind of the old way of powering the world. And the new way is wind and solar. There are other forms of renewable energy, but wind and solar are the main ones that are scalable and are plummeting in terms of their cost to generate electricity. In the last 20 years, you can see these two white lines, how they've just come way, way down. And that's because the more of these things we build, the more solar panels we build, the more wind turbines we build, the cheaper they are to build. I know this firsthand from working at Nike for many years. As soon as you make a lot of things, the cost comes way down. And these costs are projected to plummet even further. So that is why over 90% of the new electricity generation in the United States in the last several years and projected into the future, even with Trump's, efforts to make coal cool again, which is going to be hard to do. Even with all that, over 90% of the new generation is from renewables. And that's also why 24 states in the United States have made these 100% renewable targets. You wouldn't do this if it wasn't possible from an economic standpoint. And now it's more and more and more attractive economically. And those 24 states, by the way, account for over 50% of the population. So there's huge momentum going behind this electricity converting to renewable sources in the United States and around the world. At the same time, there's other really exciting things that are happening in terms of appliances. There's this whole new generation of super efficient electric appliances that are changing our lives. These are things that are dramatically more energy efficient than the things that we grew up with, that we're familiar with. These things reduce our energy bills. They even add value to our homes. There's more and more evidence that modern electric homes are more desirable in the marketplace. This is generally referred to as electrification. And just to get an idea of how dramatic these energy efficiency improvements are, it's really helpful to compare the minimum efficiency standards and how those have changed over the last 30 years between gas appliances and electric appliances. The US government mandates that gas furnaces produced in 2024 are 2% more energy efficient than the ones that were produced in 1990. That's like nothing to celebrate. But the truth is, these devices cannot be more energy efficient than they are because of the burning technology. And if you compare that to what's going on with electric devices, particularly ones that have heat pumps in them, a heat pump is at minimum has to be by law 30% more energy efficient than it was in 1990. And the ones you would actually buy are probably 50 to 70% more efficient. Air conditioner, 40%, or even our refrigerators consume much, much less electricity than they did even 10 or 15 years ago. And then heat pump water heaters, which are new to a lot of people, are so energy efficient, they're 3 to 5 times more energy efficient than the things that they would replace. So this is why gas burning technologies cannot compete with these electric devices that are just more and more energy efficient all the time. And when you look at energy consumption in the United States, you will see that over the last 20 years, our consumption has been relatively flat. And this is despite the fact that there's 51 million more people living in the United States now than there were in 2000. That's an 18% increase. We have larger homes. We have all these heat pumps that are here now that weren't in operation 20 years ago. There's 2.5 million EVs that are consuming electricity that weren't here in 2000. We have 5,000 new data centers that weren't here, and all these other plethora of electric devices, including smartphones, which weren't even a thing in 2000. And yet our consumption is relatively flat. And the reason for that is because of these efficiencies. Yes, we have more devices that consume electricity, but they get more and more efficient. And there's still a lot of efficiency gains to be made that will help to offset these additional loads that we know are coming, more data centers, electric transportation, et cetera. In this same period, electric generation has gotten cleaner and cleaner, and the absolute number of carbon emissions from our electric grid has reduced a lot and is continuing to do that because, as we said before, these addition of renewable energy into our grid. Okay, so that's kind of the big picture, but let's talk about our own homes, which is where I think most of us start to it gets personal. First of all, I think it's important to understand that as an individual, about 60% of the carbon emissions you're responsible for come from the energy you consume. Think of it as your electric bill, your gasoline purchases, your gas bill, natural gas bill, if you have that in your home. These are average numbers for the US, so it's going to vary, from place to place, and it depends on the size of your home and all sorts of things. But on average, 3.2 tons of carbon emissions are produced for every home in terms of the electricity we consume for non-heating loads. One gas car, if you drive it the average amount of miles and it gets the average fuel efficiency, is going to produce 5.5 tons of carbon emissions per year. A gas furnace about 3.8, and a water heater is the fourth biggest culprit in most of our lives at 1.5. There really is nothing else in our life that comes anywhere close to these numbers in terms of carbon emissions that we're responsible for, unless you fly a lot. And right now, there's not a solution for that other than just trying to dial that back. But even that that's coming. It's just not here yet. But there's solutions for each of these four problems that are really the big ones. And that's because we can combine renewable energy and electrification to eliminate those emissions. We can get 100% renewable energy to our homes today. You don't have to wait for the grid to get cleaner. If you go to our website, you can find out how to do that. You can, in some cases, even save money with community solar. You can put solar panels on your roof, but you don't even need to do that in some cases in order to get renewable energy. But once you have that, you can charge your electric car with that and produce zero emissions for your transportation, zero for your heating, and zero for your water heating with these super efficient technologies. So when you roll that up, again, these are average numbers. If you've got a big house, it's probably bigger than this. If you live in an apartment, it would be smaller, but a typical household in the United States produces about 20 tons of carbon emissions from those four sources that we just talked about. And if you electrify them today with the current grid mix, you would slash the emissions. They wouldn't go to zero, but they would be much less than half. And the exciting thing is that you would also slash your energy costs. Again, these are averages, but you can see that you're saving you're cutting your bills almost in half by electrifying. A lot of that comes from EVs, by the way, and water heaters. Those are two sure bets for reducing your energy bills. Sometimes a heat pump can actually cost you more. Depends on, for space heating, depends on where you live and the relative cost of energy. But in general, what you see here is when you electrify a home with two automobiles, which is average, you're going to see dramatic energy bill savings. And these numbers from the carbon emission standpoint can go to zero when you add in renewable energy. So that's why it's easy to get excited about this. And when you roll this up over 125 million households in the United States, you're talking about huge numbers for energy savings, $340 billion a year, something like that. 2.5 billion tons of carbon avoided from taking these actions. But of course, there's 125 million households that have to do this. And that's why this meeting we're having tonight is so important to get people to be aware of this and how we can take those actions in our own homes. Again, this is why it's so exciting. You hear people getting excited about this idea of electrifying everything, where we get our power from the wind and sun, for electricity, for transportation, and for heating. And it comes with energy savings, as we talked about, but also cleaner air. Think about it for a minute. Where does carbon pollution come from? The vast majority of it comes from burning fossil fuels. There's also a huge portion of our water, clean water, that's used for processing fossil fuels. It varies from 10 to as much as 30% state by state. That's used for processing fossil fuels that we could use for much better purposes. There's huge health savings, which adds up to more hundreds of billions of dollars in savings, and all this leads to a stronger economy. So there's great reasons to do this besides just the carbon savings. And in order to do this in your own home, and we won't go into the details, but there's tons of information on our website, or Rewiring America, which you'll hear from later, also has great information on this. Heat pump water heater is a technology you should be familiar with, 3 to 5 times more energy efficient. More and more people understand that heat pumps are great for heating our homes, and also provides air conditioning, provides a more comfortable and cleaner air indoors. Induction cooking is just, once you've tried it, you'll never go back. It's faster, it gives you more control. It's massively improves your indoor air quality, and it's easier to clean up. Even things like fireplaces and dryers, which are sometimes the last thing that people think about when they're trying to electrify their homes, there's good alternatives there as well. They're electric. And then, of course, electric vehicles, which can save you tons of money because they're so energy efficient. And who wants to go to a gas station? So, as I said, if you visit electrifynow.net, you'll see for every one of these actions, we have a lot of step-by-step instructions on how you can take those actions in your own home. And then one last thought, a lot of us have grown up with this idea that if we want to make the world a better place, the best thing we can do is like deprive ourselves a little bit, like turn the thermostat down, don't buy things, don't travel, wear your holy sweater for years and years, all these things. And there's wisdom to that. But those things alone are not going to solve the problem. What we have to do is we have to change our systems, and it's our energy systems, food systems. Yes, that's a whole nother conversation, but energy systems are the big culprit here. And what we've talked about today is how your individual actions can help to change the energy system, which is at the core of the problem for climate change. So thank you. I hope that was helpful, and look forward to answering questions later.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview, Brian. We'll now transition into our panel discussion, moderated by Jessica. As you hear from our panelists, please share any questions you might have into the chat. Over to you, Jessica.
Okay, hi everybody. How are you? Oh, let me straighten my camera a little bit. Hi, I am Jessica Craven. Nice to see you all here. Huge fan of Climate Action Now. As always, it's always an honor to moderate these discussions. And also a huge fan of electrification. As I was saying before this call, we just ordered our induction stove today. We're very excited, taking the next step there. So this is right on time for us. Happy Earth Day as well, everybody. So we've got two great people on our panel today. We have got, and I'm going to tell you their names and their bios, and then we will get into a conversation. So the first person is Kevin Chu. He is co-founder of Bright Saver, a new nonprofit focused on making clean energy affordable and accessible to everyone with plug-in solar. Kevin has founded and served as CEO of several tech companies since 2006, and is focused on philanthropic endeavors in both climate change solutions and economic mobility. Kevin was included in Fortune magazine's flagship 40 Under 40 list and Business Insider's Silicon Valley Top 100. And then we also have Zach Pierce. Zach is the Senior Director of State and Regional Policy at Rewiring America. Zach has spent over 10 years working as a public servant and an advocate on climate change and clean energy policy across the United States. Before joining Rewiring America, Zach served in senior climate policy roles for North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Colorado Governor Jared Polis, and Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper. So, and all three of these lovely folks are going to be on our panel. So, Brian, I am going to start with a question for you, and of course we'll just move across. But let's talk about what are the first steps a homeowner should take if they want to electrify their home. Like they want to do one thing. What would
Yeah.
that first thing be?
Well, there's no silver bullet answer to that question. It depends a lot on you as an individual in your home, I think, is the easiest way to answer that question. What's most important to you? But I would say the typical things that people think about is maybe they've got old appliances. So if you walk through your home and sort of take stock of what you have, you might find that you've got some old things that are getting close to the use of their end of useful life. That's a good place to start for some people. But some people are motivated by other things. You just talked about induction stove, for example. If you're interested in indoor air quality, and I tell you, if we knew about this, about how dangerous a gas stove was when we had little kids in our home who are really susceptible to getting asthma from gas stoves, we would have done that first, because I think that would have been the most important thing for us. And then there's other people that might be motivated by saving money. And if you want to save money on energy bills, the two best things would be a heat pump water heater or an EV. So it depends a lot on your situation, but there's lots of planning tools. Rewiring America has a great one, by the way. That's a good place to go if you're interested in this. We've got one on our website as well. But I think a lot of it just depends on, your personal situation, what's most important to you.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you. All right, well, let's pop over to Kevin for a second. Talk to me to us about plug-in solar, because I don't even know exactly what that means. What is plug-in solar, and how does it differ from traditional rooftop solar systems?
Plug-in solar is very new to the United States. It's really not quite a thing yet. It started in Germany about 10 years ago. And in Germany, over the last 3 years, especially, plug-in solar became very popular because the Ukrainian war spiked electricity costs in Germany. And so these very industrious Germans, a lot of them were renters, were trying to figure out how to get solar. And so they took off-the-shelf components and basically hung these solar panels off of their balconies, because it's relatively tighter spaces, and then literally took the inverter cable and plugged it directly into their home electrical outlet. And over the last 3 years, legislation passed making it a lot easier to do this. It made landlords have to allow their tenants to be able to install these balcony solar systems, and it's just skyrocketed. The unofficial numbers in the last 3 years is that Germany has now about 3 million households that have these plug-in solar. It's limited to 800 watts, but even at 800 watts times 3 million households, you have a lot of electricity, coming online. And so Brightsaver, our mission is to bring plug-in solar to the United States. And one of the challenges that we face here in the United States is that we use 120 volt architecture. So the solar inverters that are commonly used even here in America are 230 volts. And so they won't work if you try to plug it in. And so what we are trying to do is basically catalyze a movement here in the United States to help people get plug-in solar, to work with advocacy groups to advocate for legislation that can make it a lot easier to install these systems, and start installing certain systems that we basically custom assemble today and install in people's homes in the Bay Area. So we're really excited about this. And to Brian's point, I think, where do you get started? We think that creating easier and more affordable solutions to get started on home decarbonization and home energy generation is a really critical thing. And so in Germany, you can buy an 800 watt system for the equivalent of about $400. And within 5 minutes, you set it up, you plug it in, you're done. And I think that type of on-ramp into home decarbonization is something that can really just spark a lot of interest and a lot of action here in the United States.
That's so interesting. And just as a follow-up question to that, so you plug in one of those things, how much, so you said it's 800 watts. I don't know, I'm not good on electricity, but give me a more of an appliance, what kinds of household uses can that realistically support?
It could support quite a bit. So it could support a refrigerator. So again, during daytime hours, an 800 watt system, which is what we're starting with here in the United States, can support a refrigerator, your router, your lights, your television. It could basically support most of your daytime usage except for AC. Your cooling system is going to take a lot of cooling and heating are going to take a lot of energy, as Brian showed in his slides. It basically powers everything else. And I think what we're seeing now in Europe, what's happening is we're seeing much bigger systems. While the legal limit of how much electricity an outlet can take when you send electricity back into it is 800 in Germany. In Utah, they just passed legislation that allows 1,200 watts to be put into an outlet. You can then take the solar, plug it into a battery system. So we're seeing 3 kilowatt, type of systems being deployed in Germany that feed into a battery, and then that battery only puts 800 watts into the house. And so those types of systems are selling for a couple $1,000s, but they're really starting to save people many, many hundreds of dollars a year.
That is so cool. Okay, this is great. We'll come back to this. Zach, let's go over to you for a second. We'll popcorn around a little bit. So for you, what are the most important policies you're seeing driving home and building electrification at the state level right now?
Thanks, Jessica. I'll just start by thanking you and the panel, Climate Action Now, just for arranging and hosting this conversation, and probably most importantly for all the folks who are taking time out of, I'm sure, our busy lives to join this activation event. I'm grateful to be a part of this conversation. To answer the question, or try to answer the question, I'll just say when it comes to electrifying our buildings and modernizing our energy systems, there's not, to use Brian's term, there's not really a silver bullet when it comes to policy. But I will speak a little bit about the policies that we're focused on at Rewiring America at the state level. And the main theme that we focus on at Rewiring America is enhancing the affordability of electrification. Certainly, there are big savings that Brian has well articulated, but the reality is those savings really depend on where you are in this country, what your home currently looks like, what the spark spread is between electric and gas prices, and a range of other factors. And we know that affordability is not the only ingredient to achieving our goals and to being successful, but we do know that it's a prerequisite to achieving those goals. And the bottom line is we can't ask folks to transition to an electric appliance that's going to make their bills go up or going to present more economic hardship in their lives. And that's especially true for lower income households, disadvantaged communities that stand the most to gain through these investments, but may face the greatest barriers to adoption. So, and the other thing I'll note is that we really see affordability policies, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, as kind of a top of the funnel activator, where if we can enhance the economic value proposition of electrification defined in a few different ways, that's going to provide really valuable tailwinds to the market development, market transformation, to send the right signals to our contractors, to our manufacturers. It's going to build more public will and public support for political change and system change that we know is going to be needed to ultimately align the market transformation with the climate imperative that we are facing. At Rewiring America, we think about affordability both in terms of the household costs and the system costs. So on the household side, we're really focused on reducing both the upfront cost of electrification and the operating costs. So that's your monthly energy bills. For upfront costs, we're focused on a variety of policies to encourage and defend or advocate for new rebate programs, incentive programs that are helping to drive down the upfront costs of these appliances, especially because in many situations, these appliances do lead to lifetime savings because of the efficiencies that Brian mentioned, but it may be hard to overcome that upfront cost barrier. On the upfront cost side, we're also focused on financing programs, tariffed on-bill financing programs, and other financing programs that do help to unlock private capital and to invest in this transition. For operating costs, that gets into the wonkier world of rate reform. We're really involved in modernizing our electric rates to better reflect the actual cost of using electricity to power heat pumps, but also to provide good price signals to folks to take their bills into their own hands and consume electricity for their all-electric homes when it's cheaper to generate and deliver to those households. So rate reform is a big policy area that we're focused on to reduce operating costs. And then we're also focused on whole home electrification. So if you compare the heat pump with a battery storage system or rooftop solar, or pair it with EVs, then that economic value proposition is really going to change for you as a home owner, or someone who may not own a home but has utility in your life to make some of these transitions. So while the household cost affordability, calculus is really important, we also know that there's all sorts of things happening with our underlying energy systems that, the gas system and the electric system that the household doesn't necessarily have control over. And we are focused on policies in that space. And I won't go into too much detail, but I'll just say on the electric side, we're focused on policies that make sure we're not victims of our own success. And by that, I mean, if we had a lot of electric load to our grid, in a moment where we're already seeing stresses on the grid as it relates to extreme weather, data center demand, and other load growth, if we drive the costs per customer up of maintaining that grid, that's going to make electrification harder because it's going to go back to the operating costs, increase bills, et cetera. So we really want to leverage residential buildings and our households as a tool to put downward pressure on the cost of our grid to make our grid more efficient, more resilient. And that's not hypothetical. We've already seen this with the electrification of the transportation sector. There's a lot of opportunity to use residential buildings as a tool to make our grid more resilient and cheaper. And we're really focused on policies to do that. And then the other side of our system cost is we're not going to reach our goals if we continue to invest tens of billions of dollars every year in an increasingly antiquated gas network. And we need to make sure that we are starting to divert those increasingly risky and expensive investments in the gas system towards electrification and the all-electric future that Brian talked about, powered by renewable energy. So we're also focused on policies in that space. So that's a lot, but the TLDR is we need to improve affordability. We need to measure affordability both in terms of our individual households and the systems that serve them. And these technologies offer a promise for a future for all of us that is more affordable, more resilient, and really represents an upgrade for everyone involved.
That's so great. Thank you. And I'll just say from a messaging standpoint, not that I just really briefly, because I go on a lot of messaging calls and we've been taught over and over again that when you're talking about clean energy, if you're talking to people on the left, it's fine to talk about climate change and how important that is and why we're doing this, but if you're talking to people who are more on the right, it's better from a messaging standpoint to approach it from the fact that it's more affordable, which it is. So focusing on the affordability of it is a really good way to maybe get past certain people's resistance to just doing it for the.
Sorry to cut in really quick, but we did reach our goals. So I wanted to just take a moment to celebrate. Great work, everyone. We're already at 550 actions and we still have, a little over 20 minutes left in this event. So I think I'll bump our goal up to 650 and we could definitely get there. So keep up the good work. Thanks. Back to you, Jessica and Zach.
Okay. Thank you. But anyway, okay, well, I want to go back to our panelists. Let's circle back. We'll come back to you, Zach, and we're going to just keep popping around. Brian, I want to talk to you because I'm sure we have people on this call who are renters or people who live in multifamily housing. How can they participate in the electrification movement? Has that become any easier in recent years?
Well, there's more and more devices that are available. And in fact, Kevin's device that we were just talking about from BrightSaver is potentially a new one in our arsenal of things that we might add. But at the moment, I would say for renters, you have a couple of actions that are in the realm of the same ones for homeowners. Like, for example, getting a clean energy supply. You can sign up for community solar if this is available to you in your area. It's something that's super exciting. It's not available in every state, but where it is available, you can essentially get 100% renewable energy to your home and save yourself some money with just a few clicks of your mouse. By the way, it's really fast to do. I would highly recommend you check that out. If you're a renter, that's a super great thing to do. You don't have to own your solar panels in order to get clean energy. This BrightSaver thing will be another tool to add to get renewable energy to your home. But after that, you get into this kind of like hacks zone, so to speak. Because you don't own your infrastructure. So you don't own your stove and your furnace and your water heater. There's ways that you can use your gas furnace less, for example, by getting these portable heat pumps that, cost in the hundreds of dollars, like $500 to $700. They won't take care of all your heating and cooling loads, but they will take a huge dent out of electric resistance heating, which is expensive, or a gas furnace in the most of the year. When it gets really cold, they won't work. But that's one thing you can do. And then probably one of my favorite ones is back to induction cooking. If you've got a gas range in your rental apartment or rental property, you can get one of these little countertop induction units for about $65 from Amazon for a single burner device that plugs right into 120 volt circuit. And you can do all your cooking with that. For the most part, people mostly use one burner anyway, or maybe you have to buy two of those if you cook a lot. But you can eliminate using your gas range, which is a great way to reduce those indoor air pollutants we talked about. And then finally, I'd say, electric vehicles, anybody can own an electric vehicle. It's slightly less convenient to own one if you don't have a place where you can charge at home. But for a lot of people, what that's going to mean is going to a place where you can shop and charge your car at the same time, or something like that once a week maybe, and still get all the advantages of an electric car as a renter. So yeah, those are probably the best things you can do. And then of course, we're just talking about this today. We're doing a webinar on this exact topic next month, but you can advocate for your building owner to do things, but of course that gets into much more complicated space. It isn't as straightforward on that side.
Right. Okay. That's yeah, that is harder, but it does seem like some buildings are starting to sort of move in that direction.
Yeah, and there's more and more policy that's going to push multifamily buildings into this electrification space. It's not a lot of it yet in the United States, but you see it popping up in certain places, building performance standards or outright mandates on appliances. And California is taking a lot of action in that way. So it's coming, but right now the policies to mandate that aren't there yet. So you have this weird situation where the building owner isn't motivated to do these things because they don't really care about the costs of the energy to their tenants. But there are those hacks you can do, which are satisfying for a lot of people, and it's definitely worth it if it's something you care about.
Thank you. And Kevin, yeah, it's speaking of hacks, Mike W was asking in the chat, would you, for your wonderful sounding thing, would you need a transfer switch to get the electricity into your apartment from your solar, or people plugging directly into the solar inverters?
So you take the solar panel, go into a solar inverter, which is designed for the US market, and then those plug into a standard 120 volt electrical outlet. We do, one of the most important things is to make sure that outlet is on its own dedicated circuit. And so that's it's a little harder to do here in America. And so we, right now with the manufacturers, we're really working with them on new designs that can make that easier and easier. But today we do a professional installation. It only takes about 2 to 3 hours. And we make sure that everything is safe. We're custom assembling these components right now. And so, but we're excited about the manufacturers. Utah legislation is sparking new interest from manufacturers in the US market. And so I think we're going to see a lot of progress with easier and easier to install systems.
Now, what made Utah take the lead in this? I'm very curious. They don't sound like the state that would first pass legislation like that.
It's fascinating. Actually, when we started BrightSaver as a nonprofit. We're a 501c3, where our application is filed early in January of this year, but we'll see what happens with this new administration and what they're doing to IRS. But the Utah, when we started our organization, this was not on our radar screen. So the fact we thought we were going to be kind of tip of the spear in terms of trying to drive awareness and start building the conversation around this type of solar that can be much more affordable. Renters can get it, etc. But Utah really jumped the gun, and here we are, and that law goes into effect May 7th of this year, so just in 2 weeks. And we're really excited about that being the first state. And with that as a blueprint, we're now working with manufacturers. We're trying to work with UL and all sorts of things to unlock, kind of basically overcome every single obstacle it's going to take to make these truly mass market and affordable.
That is wild. That is wild. Okay, thank you. Well, let's see. Oh, there's a question in the chat that I'm going to let any of you take, whoever feels moved to answer. Dan in the chat says, quote, psychology is the problem, not technology. And he asks, how can we shift attitudes around electrification and encourage changes in consumer behavior? Does anyone feel like they want to take a stab at that?
I will jump in on that one. I mean, I don't know that this is the complete answer that you might be hoping for, but I think what we're seeing is that all these technologies that we're talking about are following very common adoption curves where they start out really slowly, and then at some point more and more people do it, and the early adopters do these things, they start talking to their friends and family about them, then more and more people do them. All that drives the price of these things down and the availability of them up. And at some point it becomes normal. If you look at anything from dishwashers to color televisions to smartphones, there's this kind of S-shaped thing that happened where some people are going to be slow to adopt, and no matter what you say, they're not going to do it until everybody else on the planet's done. But there are a group of people who are going to do it early. Those are the people right now that I think are the important people to be talking about. And so you who are on the call, you are that early adopter audience, or you wouldn't be here. So it's really important that people like us who have that mentality of taking action in our own hands, doing these things, and then talking to our friends and family about that, to make it really something that is just like normal. It's not like weird. And then the more people that experience these benefits, the more that you get momentum behind these things. As Zach said, there's some cost burdens, upfront cost barriers to these things, which can be problematic, which is why rebates and stuff are so important. But as these things scale, a lot of times what you'll see is those cost barriers come down and down and down. So that's my theory of change, is for the early adopters to do it and be really vocal about it. And then that will help kind of prime the pump, so to speak, to get more and more people to do it.
I could jump in. I think there's two things that I look at and think about. One is, what is the barrier to adoption? I think if we're already, if everyone here, we're all incredibly motivated, we've educated ourselves on, on all the stats, and we're motivated to do something, but that's unfortunately not the vast majority of the population. People might care about climate, they might care about these things, but having to go and get solar installations, for example, or even a major appliance upgrade, it just takes time. It takes time to do the research. It takes time to contact and find a professional that can do the installation and sell that appliance, and then time to schedule the installation. Solar in California can take 60 to 120 days from the time that somebody wants to get solar to the time that that switch is flipped on. And so certainly I think lower the barrier and try to create lower cost of appliances and other things that can be easier to install, and kind of be an on-ramp into more and more types of electrification, I think is really helpful. And I think the second thing is, here in California, at least, the cost of electricity is one of the highest in the nation. I think only Hawaii is more expensive. And so we have this other problem where installing electric appliances can be quite costly. And so I think that's why I'm so passionate about getting solar into more and more houses, and trying to help people generate free energy that's coming straight from the sun, and then that being the on-ramp again into now I've got this free energy coming in, or at least a few kilowatt hours a day. Now I can invest in that next electric appliance and take advantage of that electricity that I'm generating.
Yeah, I'll add a few additional. I mean, it's a really interesting question. I do think it's. I wish there was a psychologist on the panel. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about the voluntary daily decision making of hundreds of millions of people, and that's daunting in some ways. And I hope more psychologists jump into this work. And I'm sure there are plenty of complicated questions to answer in that sense. But I would also just, I think, posit that there's a lot of more like low-hanging fruit out there when it comes to basic education and outreach. I mean, Brian talked about I think there's still the public perspective of these technologies, or even awareness of these technologies, sometimes lags behind the latest and greatest of the technology advancement. So these newest, I mean, even in the last year, the advancements we've seen in the efficiency and performance of cold climate heat pumps has really taken great strides. Obviously, the efficiency over the last 2 decades is astounding, and there's a lot more headroom compared to the gas combustion. I still talk to, to friends and family who, when I talk about induction cooking, have it in their mind, those old electric resistance coils that are not high performance or superior tech. And we have to so there's basic education. That's a big part of this. And then I'll also just share the perspective that I think it really matters what aspect of home electrification we're talking about. When you're talking about a new vehicle or a new EV, there's definitely more of a psychological component to the latest and greatest models and what folks are looking at and what they're prioritizing. But I don't know of many people in my life who are reading the latest HVAC catalog, excited for that new Daikin ducted heat pump to come out. And so that's more about the systemic change of making sure that there's not friction when it comes to your furnace breaking out and it being replaced with an efficient electric appliance. We need to make those things the default in a way that's just part of business as usual, dealing with your house and life in a way that doesn't have to be complicated psychology, but really does need to depart from the path dependency of our incumbent fossil fuel system, which, as we know, is more polluting, more expensive, and more volatile than the clean electrified future that we're investing in.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And there's a vast difference between these types of devices. But one thing we haven't really talked about today so far, but is outdoor power tools like lawnmowers and leaf blowers and hedge trimmers and things like that. It's a pet peeve of mine, particularly gas powered leaf blowers, which we're trying to ban here in Oregon. It will start at least in Portland next year. But those devices, if you go into a place like Home Depot, for example, what you will see is this vast array of electric lawnmowers and leaf blowers and electric tools. And now the majority of their sales are actually electric. This was not true 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you would have had to spend a lot more money to get an electric device. It wouldn't have lasted very long, would have been made out of plastic and not very durable. And now there's these really literally professional grade tools that will, even the people that make them and that make also the gas powered tools will tell you the electric ones are as good or better than the gas powered ones. This happens because of people buying stuff. So I know that consumption can be a dirty word in the space of, climate action, because consumption is a problem. Yes, but it's true when people buy stuff, that sends signals to the manufacturers to make more of that. And then you get competition, so they make it better. And that makes the products increase in quality and lower in cost. It's not quite the same when you get to HVAC system, as Zach pointed out, because it's not really like a retail purchase necessarily, but the same mechanics are there. They're just slower, and they have the added problem, so to speak, or opportunity, depending on how you think of it, of the installers. And you need the installers to be excited about this, so it's why Zach in Rewiring America, and we've invested a lot of time in this with Electrify Now to be able to point people to trusted installers who, because you don't want to do the research on which heat pump's the best heat pump and which water heater is the best water heater. You just want to get an installer that you trust, and that when they put the thing in, and if it doesn't work, they're going to come back and fix it. That's what you want. And so the installer is this step in the process, which is different than even an EV, because most people are buying those as a retail purchase. That complicates this transition in a lot of ways, and it's why we need training for the installers as well, so that they're not part of the problem, because they can talk people out of this, even people who are motivated. So that's why this home electrification thing can be tricky when you get into particularly the HVAC space.
Well, and that really ties into a question we have in the chat from Trixie. One issue I'm seeing is the emergence of mistrust due to solar and clean energy scams and unethical vendors. It's not quite the same question, but she's asking, how do we prevent this and build confidence and savvy clean energy consumers? Anyone have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll offer a brief thought. I mean, I think it's a really important point, and we talk at Rewiring America talk a lot about how if 1 in 10 household experiences are kind of a horror story and, a real challenge, that's still going to define the narrative. I mean, we really need to make sure that we are not just focusing on passing all of the greatest policies and all the, the greatest like high level announcements and commitments. We really need to focus on implementation, and we need to be obsessed with the household experience because if we move too quickly and we try to, and we don't get the sequencing right, these are complicated markets, right? Everything from the household experience to the supply chain, the contractor networks, the distributors, the manufacturers, not to mention the utilities that, serve and interact with these households. We really need to make sure that we're being thoughtful about what that consumer experience looks like and feels like. And that's both affordability and convenience, but also I think getting to the question consumer protection and making sure that we're really taking seriously the role of financing and how that's being used and where it's appropriate and where it's not appropriate, what are considered best practices for consumer protections in this space for rebate programs or financing. And the good news is we have a lot to learn from these past iterations of solar deployment or other industries. And I think a lot of that is being taken into account for both policy design and program implementation in this next phase of whole home electrification.
Okay. Any final thought? We have to wrap up, but Kevin or Brian, do you want to add anything to that super, super quick?
Yeah, I'll add something to that. I think, unfortunately, it's my industry, but the solar industry there's been a lot of not so great actors, in the solar industry. And that's why, while today we do a professional install, our vision is that we want to get solar to the point where somebody can go to buy an appliance at Home Depot and plug it in without any professional installation. And I think if that's the first experience somebody has in their home decarbonization life cycle, I think they're much more likely to take the next step. So it is unfortunate that the solar industry, my industry, has left a bad taste in certain people's mouths. And hopefully, with cheaper appliances that don't require a professional install, you can get to the point that it becomes self-serve and that people have a great first step into this journey.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm going to hop in here and get us sort of wrapped up with our final housekeeping. But this has been really awesome. I've loved listening to you guys and have been learning so much in the background here. So thank you so much to our incredible panel for all your insights and perspective tonight. Also, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been taking action throughout this action party. So I am going to share my screen for just a moment. My little clip shows what we've got. So we've gotten lots of good action together tonight, looking at over 700 actions together. So thank you so much, everyone, for helping us to take this action to accelerate building decarbonization. And more generally, thank you just for showing up during what can be a stressful and chaotic, uncertain time to just take action, be together to take action. That is something to celebrate and be proud of. So thank you for being here tonight. If you like what we're doing with these climate action parties, please consider becoming a Climate Action Now supporting member. It can be as little as $4.95 per month. We've got a super tiny but dedicated and passionate team of people who put these events together. And the people who decide to be Climate Action Now supporting members really are the backbone of what makes that possible for us. We've got other action parties coming up as well. On May 7th, we're going to be hearing a live interview between the editor-in-chief of Climate Action Now, Sam Mady, and an incredible environmental economist named Dr. Sugandha Srivastava at Oxford. On May 20th, we'll have another big action party like the one we had tonight, and that will be with the science fiction author Kim Stanley Robinson, the scientist Leslie Field, and the climate policy expert Durwood Zelk. So be sure to join that. That's going to be focused on Save the Ice. With that, I'd like to share a final thank you to all of our incredible speakers and to Jessica, our wonderful moderator, for your time and enthusiasm tonight and all of your insights. But most importantly, thank you to everyone who joined. You're really the glue and the gel of what brings all of this together. And I'm so grateful that you joined tonight. That brings us to the end of this action party. To our panelists, please feel free to join the breakout room that is labeled panelists. And have a good night, everyone. And happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.